How's it going, Diablo fans? So continuing to go through my series of classic builds, this is another classic build, which is the Ice Shards Frozen Orb build. So this build I really like because this was actually the first Diablo 4 build I ever played. This was the very first build and it seemed to be like very superior at the very beginning of this build. This was a lot of varies, by the way. And the build is pretty straightforward. It's not a high speed pushing build. It's more like a relaxed playstyle build. You can play pretty much on every item level starting from level 60 or so on. And you're pretty much just gonna walk through the dungeons and shoot stuff with ice shards and spawn a lot of frozen orb, and everything in front of you is pretty much gonna die in like a barrage of frost spells. Everything is going to get frozen, everything is gonna get hit by ice shards. We're gonna use pure frost enchantments here with ice shards and frozen orb enchantments. We're not gonna use any burning shenanigans or anything. So this is the pure ice build. This is as pure ice as it gets, maybe except for Blizzard. Also, I feel like this is kind of an iconic Sorceress build. Again, this is not like the highest tier build, but it definitely won't give you any issues with pushing through tier 100s, walls and everything. You can also kill bosses. They take a little bit longer than with, you know, the single target focus build, but still you can absolutely, without any problems, kill any bosses. And the great thing about this build is it doesn't really require any uniques at all. In the footage I'm showing you here, I'm not playing any uber uniques, I'm not playing any stones, and I'm only playing 3 uniques at all. So if you're looking for more like a relaxed build with like low gear requirement and kind of an iconic playstyle with this whole frost theme here, this is probably the build you like to play. So before we go into the detailed guide, I'm always gonna do like a very quick explanation how this build works, and for this one it's also pretty simple, so I'm just gonna make it quick. As already said, this build is pretty straightforward. So we use ice shards together with the aspect of piercing cold, which makes our ice shards pierce and hit up to 4 additional enemies. Then we combine that with enhanced ice shards and greater ice shards, so ice shards will always ricochet no matter what while we have a barrier on, which basically means that our ice shards are gonna hit 1 mob and then they're gonna hit pretty much 4 additional mobs all the time. And every time we cast ice shards, also we have a 30% chance to launch a frozen orb because we used the frozen orb enchantment. Ice Shards and Frozen Orb then together will chill mobs and freeze mobs, and as soon as mobs get frozen, you guessed it, the Ice Shards enchantment comes into place, which launches Ice Shards at every frozen enemy, and these Ice Shards also going to ricochet 4 times to other enemies, and that kind of makes like this frost barrage, which is like going on to everything in front of you. The Frozen Orbs are gonna have a convenient auto aim, which is pretty much gonna hit the mobs whenever you want them to be hit, and also we use the aspect of the frozen orbit, so the frozen orb stays in place and explodes an additional 2 times, which allows it to freeze mobs very fast, and also it's gonna make all the mobs vulnerable. This is pretty much already it about the build. We are really not doing anything else. We are casting ice shards, they are gonna conjure the frozen orbs, and everything in front of us is automatically get hit by our ice shards and our frozen orb and just going to die. And as always, you can find the planner in the description down below. Also the links to all the sections of this guide are there, and you will also find a link to all my other build guides at the very bottom. And now without further ado, let's go right into the skill tree. For the skill tree, we can put 2 points into any basic skill. It simply doesn't matter since we are not using any enchantment slot from the basic skills here. And then we put 2 points into Frozen Orb and 5 points into Ice Shards. We go into greater ice shards here. We don't really need the vulnerable from ice shards, so this is going to help us tremendously to have our ice shards ricochet everywhere pretty much all the time. And for Frozen Orb, we go into Enhanced Frozen Orb and Greater Frozen Orb. This is mainly going to apply a little bit of vulnerable for us, but also like the mana regeneration passive here doesn't really make any sense. So why only 2 points into Frozen Orb? Well, at this point, I just need some extra mana regeneration. If you have Starless Skies, or you want to play Shaco, or like you have a lot of mana regeneration rolls on your like focus or on your like gloves, you can definitely put more points into here. Right now, I have these points in Frigid Breeze because I need this for boss fights and also like in some kind of, you know, low mob density scenarios. I can still get out of mana, so that's why I play Frigid Breeze, and I feel like the extra Frozen Orb damage doesn't matter so much, but if you really can't sustain the mana, you would take the points out of Frigid Breeze and put them into Frozen Orb here. Then we put 1 point into Flame Shield, 1 into Teleport, 1 into Ice Armor. We really just use these 3 defenses, just basic. Then 3 into Glass Cannon, 1 into Elemental Attunement, as pretty much always. 1 point into Align the Elements, 3 into Mana Shields, 3 into Protection to get our barrier going. Then we max out Precision Magic, since this is a lucky hit build. We put 1 into Ice Blades, 1 into Enhanced Ice Blades, and 1 into Summoned Ice Blades. This helps a little bit with cooldown reduction, but mainly we don't even need this skill slot where we have the Ice Blades on. But you know we gotta use some skill, right? And Ice Blade just seems to be the best skill here to use, because we just need to use cooldowns. It helps us a little bit with other skills, and it helps us to generate barrier. Then 1 point into Lightning Spear, into Enhanced Lightning Spear, into Invoked Lightning Spear. This is mainly going to stun stuff for us, but Lightning Spear is also one of our primary application for Vulnerable in this build. And then we don't choose any mastery skills, and we max out all these cold passives here. Icy Veil, so I wouldn't recommend skipping Icy Veil. It really helps a lot. In this build, we don't have crazy cooldown reduction, so really you want to have your barriers last as long as possible, since pretty much all of our synergies are also based on barriers. Then 3 into Cold Front for more chill. This pretty much just applies to Frozen Orb, but we want to freeze stuff as fast as possible, so this is a very nice ability here. And 3 into Snap Freeze. This helps us to freeze stuff even faster. And then last but not least, we pretty much max out this complete passive cluster here: Permafrost, Hoarfrost, Frigid Breeze, as we already talked about. If you have Starless Skies, for example, you don't need Frigid Breeze, but if you struggle with mana, just get Frigid Breeze. Since we're playing a high lucky hit base build, this really helps a lot sustaining mana. And Icy Touch. So for Hoarfrost, basically, we don't play any burning synergy in this build. We simply don't need it. We have more than enough damage, and it's just like another layer we don't really can afford, since we cannot play Firebolt enchantment in this build. So the best passive you can get here is Hoarfrost. Hoarfrost is great. It gives you additional damage. If you don't have an amulet with Hoarfrost, not so dramatic. You can also get Glass Cannon or one of these other passives like Icy Touch or Permafrost. They all work nice. And then last but not least, I already said last but not least, by the way, we use Ace's Ferocity. So first of all, we use the aspect of Ancient Flame together with this to get an extra 50% attack speed. But as mentioned many times before, Ace's Ferocity is bugged right now, so it doesn't count for fire damage, it counts for all damage. So basically this modifier gives you like 25% critical strike extra damage for all skills, and it also gives you 5% extra critical strike chance for all skills, not just fire skills. As for our skill, this is a super straightforward build. It's like, it doesn't really get much simpler than this. So we use Lightning Spear, this stuns mobs, and it also applies Vulnerable, and also we need a lot of cooldowns on our bar to get our barrier up together with the protection passive. Then we use Ice Blades. This just helps us reducing some cooldowns a little bit, and it also gives us a barrier with the protection passive. Teleport, well, not going to talk about Teleport. Flame Shield, same story, right? Cooldowns on your bar, defenses, end of story. Ice Armor, again, cooldown on your bar, defenses. So our primary ability is Ice Shards. We pretty much just spam Ice Shards. That is what this build is all about. We spam Ice Shards and shoot stuff. Then we are using the aspect of Shared Misery to spread the frozen status to everywhere. And then we use the Ice Shards enchantment to have Ice Shards be automatically shoot on all frozen enemies. And then, since we have a very high attack speed and Ice Shards don't cost a lot of mana, so we can pretty much spam them all the time, we just combine this with the Frozen Orb enchantment. It's automatically going to shoot frozen orbs for us. So we're pretty much just going to, like, you know, shoot everything in front of us, and we automatically going to shoot frozen orbs on them. We automatically going to shoot Ice Shards on them. So it's pretty much just like a Frost Barrage build, hitting everything in front of it. For the item stats and legendary aspects, make sure to check the planner in the description down below. You can always find the dream stats and items there. So this build has very low gear requirements. We literally don't need any uniques at all if we don't want to. Other than maybe Asus boots, you could say it is required. But the other uniques we don't even need. If you don't have them, it's fine. You can just throw this gear, like you can just throw this build on with level 60 or whatever and just go blast with it. Absolutely no problem. Every unique is just going to be an improvement, but it's absolutely not mandatory. As you can see, we are literally just playing 3 uniques, and these are not mandatory at all. So let's start. On our helm, we just play Shared Misery. Shared Misery we use because we want to spread the frozen status. Remember, with the Ice Shards enchantment, Ice Shards are automatically gonna shoot frozen enemies. So we want to spread this frozen status as much as possible, and Shared Misery is a very, very good ability for this. So on our helm, basically, this is not a pretty good helm, right? We would want to have another one. You would want to have total armor, maximum life, cooldown reduction, and probably crowd control duration or maximum mana, depending on your build a little bit. Intelligence is also alright. The 4 stat here is pretty much optional. Then we just play a regular chess piece with maximum life, total armor, and damage reduction. You can also like play 1 damage reduction stat and, for example, max intelligence. And then we put our disobedience on here. So, as you notice, we have 2 total armor rolls, 1 from our helmet, 1 from our chest piece, and together with disobedience, we're gonna have pretty much high enough armor. We're not exactly capped for armor, but it doesn't even seem to matter that much in this season to have your armor capped at all. Then on our gloves, we again play simple gloves. So we just want to have attack speed and critical strike chance. The rest is bonus. Ice Shards ranks are nice. Frozen Orb ranks are nice. You can also have lucky hit chance on here. You can also have intelligence on here. But I would say focus on attack speed, critical strike chance, and Ice Shards ranks. Then we play the aspect of the piercing cold. This makes our Ice Shards pierce. And this gives us this little nice Ice Shard style chain reaction we are banking on in this build. Then for our pants, we use T-Balls. T-Balls is not required, but it helps because it gives maximum resource, which is great in this build. It also gives defenses, it gives damage, and it gives us multiplicative damage. So in general, this is a very, very nice item for this build. If you don't have it, no problem. Just throw on like regular pants, and then you can, for example, play the lucky hit aspect, so aspect of fortune if you want, and just give it a go. So if you have T-Balls, it's obviously better. It's definitely the best in slot for this build, but it's absolutely not mandatory at all. Then for boots, we play Asus boots. So Asus boots is pretty much mandatory for this build. You don't have to use it, but it's gonna pretty much boost your damage by like 50% or something like that. It also has this nice mana cost reduction stat on it. It has the movement speed when killing an elite. So this is just the optimal item for this build. So focus on the movement speed roll and the critical strike chance roll. The other rolls are not so important. It's nice if you have high stats, but movement speed and critical strike chance are definitely most important on Asus. Then for a wand, we just play a conceded aspect with, you can pretty much play any wand. As always, you want to have all stats, intelligence, and 2 damage stats. In this case, my damage stats are not great. Vulnerable damage would probably be good here, and damage to crowd control. Damage to distant is also alright with this build. Mobs are pretty much always going to be distant. But again, just 2 damage stat which benefit you, which ones do not really matter at all. For our focus, we play Ancient Flame, as already mentioned, together with Asus Ferocity. This gives us a 50% attack speed bonus. I feel like I don't really need to play any additional attack speed. Wand and Focus is fast enough with the 50%. And if you want, you can play the Heady Assault Elixir for another 25%, which is definitely an option here. As for the stats on the Focus, you want to have critical strike chance, double lucky hit chance, and mana cost reduction. This is a pretty good piece. You can also replace one of the lucky hit chance with intelligence or with with mana cost reduction, for example. But this piece is pretty much alright, except for its utterly low rolled crit chance here. Then for Amulet, we want to play percent intelligence, movement speed, mana cost reduction, ranks to Hoarfrost. This is a pretty good piece here. This is definitely good. So if you have Starless Skies, you don't need the mana cost reduction, but in general, this is a pretty nice piece. We don't need any defensive stats here. We don't need any like mastery skills, defensive skills or whatever. And we play the Stormswell aspect. This is simply the best aspect where we can get the most damage bonus out of on your amulet. Then for our ring, we play a basic ring with Frozen Orbit. So I know everybody's going to say, why not Blue Rose? Why not Blue Rose? Well, I tested Blue Rose and I don't know why everybody is like freaking out on Blue Rose. I cannot make any sense of Blue Rose at all. I tried it on the dummies, I tried it on the mobs, and it doesn't make any sense. Even if you think about it, if you look at Ice Shards in this build, right? We have 23% lucky hit chance on Ice Shards, which is, we have like 100% bonus or something like that. So that's like already pretty high. So that means If a mob is frozen, even if it's frozen, you're going to get 90% out of blue rose, right? So that means 90% times 23%, let's make it then 20% or something like that. So that means every 5th ice shards is gonna spawn one little ice spike, which is doing like 1/6 of the damage of ice shards itself. So literally it does nothing at all. Don't play blue rose. It's a stupid, terrible item. Don't do it. The only good thing on blue rose is the mana cost reduction roll, and I accept that kind of, but if you really like want to get for mana cost reduction, right? We have it on our focus, we can get it on our boots, we can get it on our amulets, so really we don't need that at all. So going back to our ring, so we play crit chance, maximum life, resource generation, and lucky hit would be the best stat here. I have critical strike damage, so exchange critical strike damage here with lucky hit. And I play frozen orbit because this really helps me to freeze stuff faster with my frozen orbs here. And then last but not least, we have a Tarasha ring here, pretty basic stuff. You want to focus on high cooldown reduction and high lucky hit chance. High resource generation is a bonus if you have it, and obviously the 15% is the most important stat. So if you could choose, go like 15% damage is the best one, then comes cooldown reduction, then comes lucky hit chance, then comes resource generation. And just a quick note about Uber Uniques. So I don't play any Uber Uniques or Uber Stones in this build, so I don't want to like, show you accelerated footage with items you don't have access to. So really, I don't play any Uber Uniques. I don't play any Uber Stones. You absolutely don't need it. If you have Uber Uniques, Shaco is definitely your friend, right? If you have Shaco, it's gonna tremendously boost your damage. Yes, you're gonna lose the shared misery, but it's gonna be alright. You can play this without shared misery, no problem. And Shaco is just gonna give you +4 ranks on ice shards and +4 ranks on frozen orb, which is just gonna tremendously boost your damage. Second Uber unique for you is Ring of Starless Skies. So Ring of Starless Skies pretty much allows you to remove the mana cost reduction rolls on your gear. So you can remove mana cost reduction on your amulet, you can remove mana cost reduction on your focus, and you can put more offensive stats on there, and you just replace this ring. If you want to play Frozen Orbit, I would probably remove the conceded aspect here for Frozen Orbit, but that's kind of up to you. I feel like it plays more fluent with Frozen Orbit, and I would rather remove the 24% because you get 40% back from Starless Skies. So then you can simply just play this Frozen Orbit here instead of the conceded one. For Construct, we pretty much use the same setup we always use. So we use Flash of Adrenaline for the damage buff, with tactical support so it has less cooldown, with duration support so it lasts longer, and with safeguard support to give it a little bit more uptime because the Construct is going to teleport to us and apply the buff. So this allows us to pretty much permanently have this buff up. Then for our offensive skill, we use Tempest because this has the lowest cooldown, and we use it together with arcing support so it hits more mobs. We use the breaking support, it greatly helps us to apply vulnerable, and we use resource support. It also greatly helps us to regenerate more resource. If you have Starless Skies or if you have high resource generation on your gear, you don't really need the resource support, but it helps me in certain edge situations and especially in single target situations. So again, as you can see, I don't use any Uber Stones, but if you want to use Uber Stones, instead of the safeguard support, you would use the Genesis support here. So you can get the 50% damage bonus here up. It's not going to be up 100% of the time if your construct goes off screen, but it still has a significant uptime here. And also for like your Tempest, if you want to use your Evernight here, you can switch it for resource support most likely. If you really struggle with resources, you could also take away the breaking support. You're going to lose some vulnerable, which is probably not even going to matter that much if you play Evernight and Genesis. So this is pretty much up to you. If you struggle with mana, exchange the breaking support. If you are good with mana, exchange the resource support. For the Paragon board, we pretty much play a little bit more offensive here. It just seems like in general you don't really have to play super defensive anymore. It doesn't seem to matter all that much. Damage numbers seem pretty low, like the scaling or the mob damage scales seems to be pretty low, and also there's not so many random one-shots, and if you can avoid them with defenses anyway, you're gonna have like a crazy defensive build. A regular build is not gonna help you to avoid random one-shots anyway. So we play a relatively offensive focused Paragon board here. So first of all, we play Winter. Winter Glyph gives us 15% multiplicative damage, and it also buffs our non-fist damage and all resistances here. Then moving over to the next board, that's going to be the Enchantment Master board. We just pick up a little bit of non-fist and max life here. We pick the non-fist here and the all resistances here. Put in our Elementalist Glyph, which gives us a 15% damage buff, and it also gives us, again, bonus to all resistances and the non-physical damage here. Moving over to the next board, that's the Burning Instinct. We solely use this for the glyph slot here because we're not going to play any burning whatsoever. So we just put in our exploit here just for the 10% damage multiplier, and we pick these defensive nodes here. Note, if you feel like you don't need the armor, you can definitely skip these. And also, if you feel like you don't need this damage reduction at all, because, you know, maybe the gauntlet is like super easy or whatever, we can remove this entire cluster, switch this one to int, and you can redistribute this point somewhere where you can actually get damage. So you can get like this cluster here if you want, and also you could get, for example, this cluster here. This is two good things you could actually use these defensive nodes for if you want to. Then moving over to the next board, that is going to be the Frigid Fate. We're going to pick the Frigid Fate legendary node. It gives us a nice 30% damage buff here. We pick up the vulnerable damage reduction node here. It still helps quite a bit. Mobs are pretty much going to be vulnerable all the time. And then we put in our Enchanter Glyph here. This gives us a nice non-physical damage buff. And we also pick like these supporting nodes here. The next board is actually the Elemental Summoner board. Sorry, I had to cut this video real quick because there was a mistake in the board. Anyway, so the Elemental Summoner we get, and we just get the resistances here, and we put in our Tactician Glyph to just give us more resistance, more intelligence, and a little bit more conjuration damage. Doesn't even matter, but we get more resistances and intelligence here. Then moving over to the next board, that is going to be the Searing Heat board. We just picked this for the glyph socket once again, so we put in our control glyph here with 39 dexterity. This gives us 10% to chilled and 20% to stunned enemies, so this has a very high uptime in this build, and we just picked this for the intelligence here again. And then moving over to the next board, that is going to be the Ceaseless Conduit board. Again, we just picked this for the glyph socket. We're going to put in our Destruction Glyph here with 44 dexterity. This gives us massive critical strike damage bonus and also multiplicative damage bonus. And then our last board is going to be the Icefall board. We just pick the legendary Icefall node here. This gives us 15% extra frost damage and also 30% extra frost damage to frozen enemies, which is going to be, you know, active a lot of the times. And then we pick up this little cold damage here with the chill application. So I highly recommend getting this chill application. It really helps a lot freezing stuff faster. And we want to freeze stuff as fast as possible so our Ice Shards enchantment can go to town. There you have it. That's my Ice Shards Frozen Orb build. Again, super simple build, super simple to make. It's really just going forward, shooting stuff in front of you. So this is kind of an iconic Sorceress build, a classic Sorceress build. Not so much of a melee build, how the meta currently evolves. So it's definitely fun playing it. It has a nice frost theme. And I hope you enjoy the video. I'm going to leave you the Nightmare Dungeons now. And I see you guys next time.